I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about The Devils.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we are going to be watching a musical, Vincent Minnelli's An American in Paris. Gene Kelly has long been one of my favorite actor, director, producer people of that era, even though as a person he's kind of terrible. But I mean, a lot of them were kind of terrible. So you give and you take, and Vincent Minnelli's work is always very beautiful and bright and colorful. Have you seen any of Vincent Minnelli's stuff?
Maybe not. I don't think so. But yeah, he's definitely a blind spot for me for sure.
It's fun. It's a good
I
time.
get to him.
It's a really good
Yeah.
time. I'm excited.
hmm
Very different. And what we watch this week, The Devils.
Actually, have I seen any Vincent Minnelli movies? Oh, you know what? Maybe like last month I watched Meet Me in St. Louis for
Oh
the first
yeah,
time.
with
That
Judy
one's pretty
Garland.
good. Yeah, that one was pretty good. That one is pretty crazy. So
Yeah, Vincent
anyway, yeah, I
Minnelli
just
stuff. There's like this weird dreamlike quality to his work. I mean, it's so like
it
bright.
goes hard.
It does. It
I
really
love
does.
it.
And Gene Kelly,
That
he's
was
a
good.
crazy person. So
Yeah, I like him a
he's
lot. I mean, Singing in the Rain, I love that movie. That's probably
ugh,
one of the best movies ever made.
love singing in the rain.
Yeah.
And I swear I've seen American Paris before, but both on IMDb and Letterboxd, it's not logged.
Yeah.
I'm not confident I've seen it before or not. Like I have like specific moments in my head that I can think of, but now I'm not sure if it's from that movie or if it's from just a very similar movie with Gene Kelly and he's also in
Yeah.
Paris. Because I mean that whole era,
They all string
studio
together
girl,
pretty much. Yeah.
it's all kind of just one
Oh man.
movie. So,
Yeah.
but you suggested The Devils, which you've seen before. Is that
Oh
right?
yeah, I've seen this movie before, definitely. Yeah.
When
hmm
we were
Yeah.
talking about it last time, you
hmm
sort of described it as this holy mountain experience, which
I
is
yeah.
the expectations I had going into it. And there's definitely parallels to be made between these two films for sure. But I am happy to say that I think it's a very different film
No,
than
I mean it is. It's just like I just think there's a lot going on between both movies with religion. I
for
think they're
sure.
the movies are very 70s. Their presentations are just unbelievable. It's just crazy. The Devils, it's more The Devil is based off a play which is based off a book that was written by Aldous Huxley, like a non-fiction book.
Really?
So there's definitely more more history stuff going on. Holy Mountain is more kind of like it's like based on like a thing,
Right.
right? While Holy Mountain is more just kind of like this amalgamation of
Like
like
a dream
everything.
experience.
Yeah, which I love Holy Mountain. It's an amazing movie. But I think I like The Devils a little bit more than the Holy Mountain because I think there is like, probably a little bit more to grasp and the acting in it is amazing too.
The performances in this film are just absolutely spectacular. I mean, everyone goes absolutely insane in this movie, in a very insane movie. And I love that opening credits where they say everything in this movie actually happened,
Yeah,
which
sure.
is
Yeah.
true-ish. I mean, I
It
guess
probably maybe not in the way that it
probably
looks,
not
but yeah.
exactly, but the big ideas are there, right? And it doesn't really matter if
Yeah,
it's true or not, but
whatever.
even if it's true or not true, the sort of creation of the illusion of truth here that all this stuff actually happened and this is how the Catholic Church or these other churches and people interacted is not surprising. I don't think anyone's surprised by
hmm
the trials and tribulations that were and continue to be the Catholic Church. But you grew up Catholic, didn't you, Andrew?
Yeah, I did.
Is this what being a Catholic's like?
Yeah, I would say so. Definitely, yeah. Not too far off. I fucking love this movie, man. It's so good. It was banned a lot.
I can see that. A lot of
That's
reasons.
why I like the distribution of the movie is kind of weird. The cut on Criterion that they have for the Ken Russell collection is like not in HD for some reason. I don't know why it's like that. I just think that like the movie has been like recut and fucked around with so much, and it was like it got an X rating when it came out. Unfair. It's not a pornographic movie at all. There's
No.
a lot of nudity and there's quite a bit of violence, but it's not a pornographic film. So it's like not fair to give it like an X rating. But probably more than any of that stuff too, is that it's incredibly sacrilegious. That's probably the main thing why countries
That's
want
the
to have
real
it banned.
reason why it's been banned in
Yeah.
so many. It has nothing to do with the sex or the violence because there's plenty of
It's just
sexier, more
icing.
violent
I
movies,
mean, yeah, yeah. It's just like it's sex and violence that kind of has the sacrilegious goal.
and people don't like that. People don't want to be told that religious sex aren't exactly what we want them to be. And this is about as dark. And although obviously there's a lot terrible to be said about the Catholic Church and sort of hierarchy and these sort of things, but I don't necessarily think this is an anti-religious films. In fact, I would argue that in some ways this is a very religious piece, and our protagonist here, his faith is really a strong point in this piece. And I was really
No, definitely.
torn by a lot of our characters here because I wasn't sure who to root for because they're all terrible people. I mean, there's
No,
not,
I'm rooting for Oliver Reed. I'm rooting for Oliver Reed. He's the cool priest. He's like a swagged out priest, like that everyone loves, and he's cool. And he
but
has sex with like a bunch of people because he's just like I don't care.
he is very cool, undeniably. But he's
He's
also
rocks.
at the beginning, and of course, this
Yeah,
is
he does. Yeah, he gets the
right.
yeah like when she went yeah like he's kind of right like he's dismissive of
He's dismissive. He's manipulative. He
yeah
uses his
right
power
yeah.
to get sex and more power and these sorts of things. So he doesn't start out as a good person, but then relative to everyone else in the piece, because I think what makes him a good person at the core of it, or quote unquote good person, whatever the hell that actually means, is here's someone who has a belief in God and higher up,
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it, and he is unwilling to let go of that belief
Hmm.
despite all the pain and suffering. And he does truly fall in love and he believes in that love and he gets married. I mean, that's the whole big thing.
Yeah.
He believes in his love so much he is willing to die for that love. And it's a weird, dark love story, but I think it is a really honest and true depiction of love and also what it means to be a man of faith, whatever that faith is. And this is speaking as someone who isn't Catholic by any means or Christian, but who holds some sort of faith or attempts to hold some sort of faith. And I think there's something weirdly inspiring, even if it is dark and
I wouldn't say it's weird.
twisted.
I wouldn't say it's weird at all. I find it, I admire a person who has strongly held beliefs
Yeah.
and sticks to them. That's why the movie's kind of frustrating, is because you have the Oliver Reed character who has these like super strong beliefs and is essentially harmless for the most part. But because of things, politics and power, he's destroyed by people who use faith in religion to manipulate and use it like as kind of like this cynical like weapon to get what they want.
And we see that on both sides of the spectrum. And there is this very real sort of separation between male and female, sort of the dynamic. And it reminds me of a much worse movie, but has some great performances in it. I think it's called Doubt, the movie with Meryl Streep and Philip Seymour Hoffman. I think that's the
Yeah.
name of the movie. He's like a Catholic guy and he doesn't, and they don't know if he's raped children or not. But the point I'm trying to make here is in Doubt, there's this juxtaposition between the nuns and the priests, where the priests
Hmm.
sort of lavish in wealth and they're eating these hefty meals, steak, and these sort of things, and
Hmm.
the nuns are very
They're cloistered.
cloistered.
They,
Yeah, I
they
think
don't
that's
eat
the best
anything
word.
or do anything.
And there's that great moment early on when we're first introduced to the nuns, and they're all trying to see the priest
They're
because
like
he's so
they're
handsome.
extremely sexually repressed as well, which is a big part of the movie.
Extremely. Which, as the head nun person points out, when one
Yeah.
of the people tries to become a nun, she's like, most people that are here aren't here because of their faith. They're not just like, these virgins who are like, oh, I want to be Christian. They're
Yeah,
mostly
it's a great
sent
speech.
here, which also just sort of mirrors the way men and women are treated in the world of then and in the world of now, where women are sent there because they are too sexually active, right? Because
Hmm.
they do the things that they want to do, and so their punishment is to become these cloistered creatures that are I mean, imprisoned. The nunnery looks
Yeah, they're
like
in
a
prison.
prison. The abbey has like all of the makings of a prison,
Hmm.
and the way they march around and the way they do things, it's very
Hmm.
reminiscent of just this awful, terrible place.
And it doesn't help too that their leader, Jean de Agnes, is like she's also quite crazy. It is everybody is crazy. Everybody's now like totally like lost their minds. And Jean de Agnes, she's so sexually repressed. She's essentially 100% in love with Grandier,
She
and to the
literally
point
sees
where
him as
she
Jesus Christ.
fantasized. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like she
Yeah.
literally fantasized him as literally being Jesus Christ. And yeah, like it would that would probably like happen to a person, right? Because it's like if you're like a cloistered nun in like the 17th century France, there's very I feel like there's very little information that you're taking in, at least compared to like the world we live in now. So I feel like yeah, you would like be having like dreams all the time about like Jesus and this or that. Like you would be like hallucinating, quote unquote hallucinating things all the time about these things, which again is why like the witch hunting thing is also like frustrating because it's like, oh, they're witches. I don't know if you were like cloistered and trapped like in this place where all you did was read the Bible and pray and not do anything else pretty much, that yeah, you probably would be like hallucinating or having weird dreams or
Yeah, I can't help but be reminded of the explorers and adventurers who spend months or even years in the Arctic or Antarctica, and the descriptions of these individuals when you read their journals about having these extremely vivid and colorful hallucinations because they're constantly just staring at the blank white snow. And it's the same thing happening here, is they're,
yeah.
I mean, both literally staring at these blank white walls and white floors, and then also their entire world is just the Bible, and that's it. They don't talk to anyone in the outside world. I mean, there's literally bars in
Yeah.
front of them whenever they try to communicate with the outside
Yeah.
world. They don't experience anything that anyone else experiences. That one time they tried to experience the rest of the world towards the beginning when they tried to see him, and the death of a priest. Is that who died? Someone died.
Yeah, like the leader of their little town,
Yeah.
the leader of
Mayor?
their fortification, like he dies. I think he's like a priest or something. And so now Grandier is like in charge, which is like the beginning of the movie, which is why they want to destroy him. They want to take down the town.
I love how Grandier's main interest isn't power, because it would be so easy to make this movie, oh, he comes up to power and now he's trying to grab more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's completely uninterested in anything other than his small town. And we see that juxtaposition. I mean, the opening scene isn't even with them,
Yeah.
it's with the king and the cardinal, I believe. Or is
Yeah,
that
it's like a king and a cardinal. They want to destroy like all these little like fortifications in
Mhm.
France and unite, quote unquote, unite everyone because they're like afraid of Protestants essentially.
I love that moment. And I think a first time watcher may just miss how funny this movie is because it's so twisted and
No,
dark.
it's really funny.
But it is a really funny movie, especially in some of the editing.
It was
Like we'll
off.
talk about the Protestants, and then there's that cut to the burned man swinging or
Yeah.
spinning on that,
That's a crazy
that
cut,
giant
yeah.
wheel.
And like that those like the I like too, they have the shots at the beginning and the end where it's just like a wide plane out from the city and then yeah, you have
Mhm.
like the we're assuming Protestants on like spinning wheels that are really high. Those are great shots.
Truly incredible set design and just a giant and beautiful world that they built for this film. And you really feel like you're in a 16th century or 17th century, whatever century that they're supposed to
It's
be,
17th century.
17th century. So 1600s type of world. I mean, it doesn't feel like one of those pieces where everyone has these giant costumes that are sort of trying to win an Oscar or this or that. Like it feels as if we are part of this world, and incredible that wall that they build looks amazing. And that's
Yeah, it looks like a real
big
wall.
thing. It looks like a real wall, and they're
It
tearing it
looks like a
down
fortificated it looks like a yeah, like a fortified city of some sort in like
like that moment
medieval
where
times.
I wonder if this was a real thing. Though all those people walking on that wheel, like that hamster wheel. Do you think that was a real thing
That
that
was
actually
probably a real
existed?
thing. They probably had like, yeah, they probably had horrible like torture devices that even you and I can never conceive of in order to torture Protestants and black people and stuff like that. I like the funniest characters are like they're not doctors.
They're quote unquote doctors, right? They have the long nose, the plague
Right. They're
people,
like,
right?
yeah, right. And the plague is going on at the same time too, sort
Yes.
of, more or less. So like there are like piles of bodies everywhere too, and it's
Disgusting.
disgusting. Yeah,
Oh,
they're like plague doctors and like yeah, and there's that scene at the beginning, right, where he meets his future wife. Her like loved one is like dying horribly, and they're using like bees. It's like what the fuck? Like when you're shoved into that scene, you're just like, man, I don't know what the fuck is going on. Like
but that's like
yeah,
legitimately the kind of stuff
that's
that
some
they
real shit.
did.
Yeah, because they didn't like know what else to do, and they're just like, I guess this will work,
They just kept trying stuff,
but it just
and
makes it worse. Like,
just makes their lives much more painful. I mean, I imagine the plague was already painful enough, but then to test all of these terrible ideas, because
Yeah.
Doctors didn't fucking know what was going on. There was no fucking
The concept of
degree
science
for
has barely been invented.
yeah, exactly. Science itself was a brand new thing. So these doctors, they don't know they're hilarious because they're just
Yeah.
clearly making shit up as they go along.
Right. I'm trying to think of some of the funny shit that they do or like some of the crazy shit that they do.
The alligator,
The alligator. Yeah, where it's like that is such a weird 70s thing, like with the alligator there. It's like, what is this
the
doing here? And he
very
like
clearly
throws
a
it
rubber
he
alligator.
he throws it out the window. Oh, that's so good. Again, once again, like the one of the main reasons to watch the movie is the central Oliver Reed performance, who's one of the greatest actors of all time who ever
Mhm.
lived. He was like a very British, he's like a British Orson Welles.
He really
Wait,
is.
wait, Orson Welles is British.
No,
Oh, he's not? Oh,
no,
okay. I
Orson
thought he
Welles.
was.
I'm actually reading his biography right now. Orson Welles grew up in, I think he grew up in sort of like the New Hampshire, Vermont area, and then he moved
Okay.
to like near New York, Connecticut
Okay,
to go to
okay.
private
All
school.
right. Well, yeah, then my statement was correct. He's
Then
like a
your
British
statement is
Orson
completely correct.
Welles.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like a British Orson Welles. Like he's like the same shape. He's got kind of like the similar voice.
Mhm.
I know like Orson Welles, he had a very tumultuous life. In this movie, he's just great. He has so much power in his performance.
Yeah, I think so much of this film perhaps not depends on Oliver Reed, but the weight of the film is really up to him. And I think without that incredible performance, this film would probably it would bear down on the shoulders too strongly of most actors. And so it really takes a lot for someone to be able to
Hmm.
perhaps not carry the movie because there's incredible performances all around and great direction, great sound design, and everything is incredible going on. But to sort of be at the forefront of this film and to
Yeah.
balance the horrible actions and the silly things. And I think this is a really hard thing to do, which it's a question of when do we lean into sort of the silliness of something versus when are we serious and not taking either of those lightly. Because I think you could make this film where it is just so absurd and silly that you lose the darkness of it. And then on the opposite end, it could be so dark because there are so many dark scenes that you lose sort of this whimsical absurdity that's also there. And there's this great balance here that
Hmm.
Oliver Reed, I think, is sort of the guy who holds this whole thing there. He's the glue, as it were, that
Hmm.
holds these two separate parts together.
He's just great. Like I don't know what to say. Like he's just a great character, and he's so much yelling, and he's just he goes all the way with it. And I really like, but of course, I of course like we talked about, the head nun. She's really good. Sister Jean Agnes. She's of course really good too, and of course she's kind of like the ensuing person that essentially
Mhm.
caps off the whole movie, right? Where she's like upset that like he's getting married and stuff. She's extremely jealous, and she has like visions of him, and she tells a guy who doesn't like Grandier that she's been having these visions, and then he basically like goes right in and is just like, are these like exorcists, like are you being possessed by the devil through Grandier? Did Grandier like do this to you? And she's basically just like, she doesn't say yes right away, right? Like she doesn't really say that. She kind of suggests it, and then she
Yeah.
is like tortured a little bit, and then she
Until
eventually
she
does
admits it.
until she admits it. Yeah.
Which is sort of the wild thing about her character, which is another incredible performance here, is she's angry at him because he's getting married and she feels possessive of him in this way, as if he's wronged her personally.
But they've never met each other.
They've never met her. She has never had a conversation, which he points out. He's like, I have never met this woman before. I have never seen this woman. And of course, no one believes him. Although it also, I guess it makes the exorcism all the more believable because they're like, oh, well, if you've never met him, then clearly this must be the work of the
Yeah.
devil or what have you. And her motives are so fascinating because she wants to hurt him, but then she also wants to protect him at the same time. So she wants to stop this marriage from happening. But then when she
Yeah.
realizes sort of the shit that she has put herself in, she tries to resist, but the torture is
Uh-huh.
pretty freaking awful. I mean, we don't see all the torture. Of course, they have the
We see
the
all their
moment where
instruments
the
and what the
right
what we think that they might do, and yeah, it's pretty bad.
and some incredible sound design here where you're just like flinching
Yeah, it's
and it's
bad.
just like gross and slimy and all this great stuff. So even though she's sort of the thing that brings him down, she doesn't want to be this thing, and yet she becomes the very thing that
Mhm.
she doesn't want to become. While sort of, I would say some of our other characters are a little more calculating Perhaps my favorite character in this piece is the guy who does the exorcisms, the John Lennon
That
looking
guy is
guy.
fucking awesome. Yeah, no, he looks like that guy. Someone made a joke about it on Twitter the other day, but that guy's like he's like straight out of the '60s, right? Like he's like
Yeah.
a guy that came time traveled from the '60s to the movie. Like he doesn't really look like a guy from the 17th century. He looks like a hippie from the '60s.
Yes.
So yeah, but he's a great actor and he's really really good. He really does believe in like the fact that like Grandier is like a devil worshiper witch guy or
Yes.
whatever. And so he completely believes that and he just completely loses it the whole movie.
Every
And
minute
him
he's
and
on screen.
he's probably another one of the few characters. He's like similar to Grandier where they both have total belief in their faith and he does too, the exorcist guy, but he's like being used by like the evil like government Catholic church agents, right?
Hmm.
To meet their ends.
And I was going to make the exact same point that you made is sort of how Grandier and our exorcist are sort of two sides of the same coin, where here are two
Yeah.
people who legitimately believe that they are doing the right thing. And they are so hell-bent on their own faith, even to the destruction of themselves and others. And I think what's so fascinating about him is just like Grandier, he genuinely believes that when he's doing these exorcists, that he's doing the right thing. He doesn't think he cannot get past this idea that the devil has consumed these people. And obviously the nuns are in on it. They're clearly like, we're just gonna do whatever the fuck we have to do to not be tortured and killed. I mean, it's very clearly they do whatever they gotta do. And there is that moment where the nuns are all wrapped in that giant grave and they're all about to be shot. Almost like a twinkle in his eye when he sort of realizes what he's doing. Like he kind of sees the political into it, and yet there's something about it because we see it there at the end when Grandier gets burned alive is he still believes that what he's doing is the right thing. He doesn't see the political sort of underbelly of it, which somehow makes him almost worse than the king or the cardinal, because at least the cardinal and
Hmm.
the king, they know that they're evil and they know that they're doing evil things. And I love that moment where the king comes
Yeah.
in with the box that he gives to.
Yeah, he like fucks with them. That's such a weird scene.
It's such a strange moment because you think
He's like he doesn't give a fuck.
he doesn't care. The king could
Yeah.
not care less either way. So he defrauds him, and yet still Grandier is burned alive even after this fraud is revealed. Like no one believes
Yeah.
it, which is wild because like the king, it's almost like the king's in this different world that no one else seems to see because the king to him, he's like, I have just defrauded you. You are all clearly lying. You have no idea what you're talking about. And yet they still continue on that exorcist route for the rest of the film and still burn him alive for the exact thing.
Yeah, it just makes everything like even more crazier and more insane, which
Hmm.
like I also too love like the church set piece, which is what we're in for most of the part where
Yeah.
like all everybody the fervor that everybody has where it's like the nuns are like they're like naked and they're running around and stuff like that and they're taking down like the crucifix and stuff and that whole room and like the design of it looks amazing and everybody's like kind of like watching it off to the side again back in the 17th century, there probably wasn't a lot to do. So it was just kind of like, what are you going to do today? Well, I'm going to, because there's this thing happening. I'm going to go over there and stand and watch. Like, it's just like, that's pretty much your TV.
I mean, that's why people watched public executions and burnings and all
Right.
that.
Yeah. It's
I'm
like, I
convinced
don't know
that's
what
part
else
of
to
the
do
reason
today.
why they even had them is
But
because
yeah.
people just needed something to do. And so let's just
Yeah.
go watch
Well, we're
someone
going to
be
execute
hanged
him
or
anyway.
burned.
So yeah.
Might as well.
Again, that church set piece is just fucking crazy. And it is so just like the trial that Grandier is given is just like ridiculous, right? Like the whole thing is just like it's just one of those movies where it's like kind of like a frustrating movie because it's like it's one of those like kind of like frustrating like law
It's
kind of
kind of like Mandabi in
blatant.
that way. You know what
Yeah,
I
kind of like
mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's like a frustrating, like from bad to worse kind of situation where, like we like, and it's a movie where we know that he's innocent. Like he didn't really do anything wrong in the instances that he can't even like. It's funny too because like Grenier did do things wrong, like he impregnated that young girl and everything, but they want revenge, right? So they're putting all their weight but they can't really like do anything about it so they're putting all their weight into getting him accused of being a witch or whatever or being like a devil worshiper or whatever. I love that scene where they go another room I like is his apartment. I love his apartment, his
Yeah.
home. They
His
knock
song is
everything
crazy
down.
looking.
That scene where they knock everything down.
Yeah, that's a wonderful moment where he's flipping out because no matter what he does, he is sort of doomed, and yet he holds on to this faith so tightly and this belief in God and his benevolence that even when things are clearly doomed for him, I mean, it's clear that whatever he does, he's fucked. Even then, he is convinced that he's going to be saved. I mean, he keeps telling his wife over and over and over again, God's going to save us. God's good, and he just
Yeah.
can't see the political because they give him chances to just say
Right.
whatever
Well,
and
he
not
does
go through the
see it, but
torture.
he can't let go.
He cannot. I mean, I guess he can see it to a certain extent, but I think part of him is blinded by his own faith, for better or worse.
Well, I think he doesn't he like at least a couple times like say to everyone like look what they're doing like it's a sham like
Right.
it's a show trial they're trying to take the city.
Yeah. So I guess he sees it on that end, but like he doesn't see that he has, if he wants to survive, if he wants his city to survive, he has to be part of the game. He refuses to accept that this is how his world works. He wants to live in a world where people are good and they do good for the good of mankind
Yeah,
and
and like don't
everything will work
lie and
out.
all this stuff. Yeah.
And he accepts that he has sinned. He accepts that he's done wrong things and
Yeah.
he admits to those things. And when they
Yeah.
torture him, like those are the things he admits to. He says, I,
Right.
I,
They're
I
like
had sex. And
confess and he's like, "Yeah, I admit that I did this and this and this." And they're like, "No, no, no, that's not what we want."
oh, that moment where
And
they're
then
smashing his knees.
yeah,
Oh
the
my God.
sound like the
Oh,
sound of when they like
the
hit him
crackling.
and then when he yells like his screaming, that combination is great. It's such amazing.
It's such a cinematic moment. It's almost as awful as it is. You kind of,
Like, wow.
yeah, it is like this is
That's
why we
crazy.
watch movies. This is why we make movies. You know, like this is one of the this is one of the moments in history. This is a cinema moment, and you're so lost in it, even though simultaneously it is awful and terrible, and it makes you cringe. You can't help but be amazed by just
Hmm.
everything involved.
Yeah, they like cut off all his hair too.
Sure
They put him
do.
in the big robes. It's weird. Like the for some reason like the court or whatever, like the judges, they're like dressed up in like Ku Klux KKK looking
Yeah, I guess
outfits.
that
I'm
was
unaware of
the
this.
thing.
Maybe they did actually look like that. I don't know.
It feels right for some reason. I don't know why that
No, it
feels
definitely does.
right.
No, everything is good. No, everything looks great and is well chosen and outfit. Everything looks great.
I love the way that court looks, especially because you have
Looks sick.
all of the extras in the background, the townspeople,
Hmm.
they're all wearing those really cool bird masks or masquerade masks.
Yeah, they're like wearing masks.
Because I guess you don't want to
Yeah.
be seen just in case the person's innocent, I think is the idea. So it's sort of this way of
Okay.
participating in the execution or lack of execution
Right.
without having to feel
Yeah.
the guilt. Because they do the same thing when they go to the exorcism, is all of the people who watch are also wearing those really cool bird masks and
Hmm.
masquerade masks. Suppose it's to hide like who's who or what have you.
No, again, that room, that area, you're in there for a while, but it's great. It feels like an amorphous, changing
Mhm.
room. It's crazy.
I have to admit, my heart was a bit broken that this is a film I couldn't experience in a theater because it's so
Yeah, it's
big.
wide. It's a very wide.
It's got that
Yeah,
modern Denis Villeneuve, everything's giant, and you just want to see it on a giant screen in like an
that would be
IMAX
great.
theater, and
Yeah.
you just wish you could have that sort of experience with this. I mean, it's fine watching it on a TV and you can still enjoy it and all the sound and all of that, but I can only imagine going to a theater and just seeing the giant walls and all of the yelling and
Mhm.
screaming and Dolby, and it would just be such a wonderful experience to have. And I don't think all experiences need to be shown in a theater, although I think it increases all experiences. But this is definitely something that I really wish we could go to a theater and see because it is such
Yeah.
a truly cinematic experience.
Yeah, it's kind of like what all like movies are about. I just really like this. I just think like a movie like this is just it kind of like this is like intersection of all these different things like religion, politics, history, sex, violence, torture, spectacle, theater, all these things like they kind of like meet like at this intersection in the movie. And that to me is what movies are all about, right? It's not just about one thing, it's about so many other so it's about so many things. And yet it feels so cohesive and it feels like you just travel back in time. And that's kind of hard, and not that like it's like, oh, it's so accurate, it's so this or that, but 17th century is probably a fucking science fiction planet compared to where we
Truly.
live today. Making a movie where it really truly feels like you're in a different place entirely, even though we just went back in time on the same planet. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I guess to like mention more contemporary director. Who's the witch director? I already forgot his name.
Oh, Robert
Um,
Eggers.
yeah, like a Robert Eggers movie or something like that. That's probably kind of like the Northman. That's maybe like another movie I would say is kind of like this, but obviously different places and things going on. Yeah, that's probably a good contemporary comparison to make.
And like those films, it feels as if we're in this place in time without it feeling sort of peacocky almost. I think, especially when we talk about modern creations of 16th, 17th, 18th century, is they're so excited by the bright colors and the dresses and the castles and all of these things that kind of just feels like we're showing off and how impressive our
Mhm.
costume design and set design is, and you don't actually feel part of the era. It just feels like modern people dressed in the costume of that era.
It's like we're a Walt Disney World or something.
Exactly. And so many of those feel like that. Where this, and perhaps too, it's just the ability to recognize famous actors and of course Oliver Reed, but otherwise, I mean, not that there aren't big names in this, but maybe just because it's older and it's more detached, but I still feel as if I am in this world. And I think that's the real reason, as you're kind of saying, it's almost like this science fiction piece, because instead of just saying it's our world, but 400 years ago, they're recognizing that, well, like the world 400 years ago was a fundamentally different world, and so it is sort of
Yeah.
traveling to another space and time, and we need to sort of look at it like that, which I think they do a great job of doing that. I mean, even their speech, I know it's based off of a play, so I'm sure they
Mhm.
adapt a lot of the dialogue, and incredible writing. I mean, as someone who is currently reading Macbeth with my kids, it sounds like something that was written during that time
Yeah.
period, even though, of course, it is a more modern writing.
Mhm.
So, just a really incredible use of dialogue and language,
Mhm.
and properly using, which they don't often, language of the era and the way people spoke to each other.
Like a Shakespeare play. It's a very tragic ending, a very languished,
Mm.
long ending. Just because it's like you get to the trial part of the movie, and like you already know the decision that they've made,
Yeah.
and so then they make the decision that he will be put to death, and then he's tortured more, and they're like, "You need to confess," and he's like, "I'm not gonna do it," and then they're like, "All right, we're gonna burn you at the stake."
And that whole scene is incredible. I mean, after watching him being tortured and his head shaved and all this, and he's walking down, and you can see on the townspeople's faces, they sort of they see the sham for what it is at this point. I mean, through all of this, they sort of believed it,
Yeah,
but
everybody kind of has like a change of heart all of a sudden.
yeah, they get it. Like they see him and they realize what's going on. And one of the executioners says, "Oh, I have a noose, and I'm going to strangle you before they actually light the flames because it'll be a much safer death."
Yeah.
And of course, again, the exorcist guy's like, "Confess, confess, confess." He really wants
Yeah,
him to confess,
yeah, he's
but I mean, he holds true. He doesn't confess, and they light the fucking wood and all that shit. And of course, the rope, the noose is broken or cut or whatever, whether it's on
the
purpose or by accident.
yeah, he like the guy, the priest guy who's like related to the girl who got pregnant. He breaks
Mhm.
it because I think he
Right.
has like a change of heart or something like that.
And that moment when is so beautiful, weirdly enough, where he's being burned alive and everything is you're looking through the fire. It's as if you are literally in hell at that moment, and it's
Yeah,
through
it's
these
the hell's
flames.
yeah, through
Mhm.
his eyes, like with the flames. Yeah.
In front of everything.
Yeah.
And you can see like the maniacal laughing and of course the lighting and all this stuff going on, and it is such a terrible and awful and heart-wrenching moment, and yet so satisfying in this weird way, because even though
Yeah.
Grandier is being burned alive, in a way he kind of won, because despite everything, despite the fact that he was tortured and is being murdered and it's terrible, he
Mhm.
he held true to his beliefs to the very end. In a certain way, he beat them. I mean, sure, he's dead and they're going to tear down the city and the
I
inevitable is
guess
going
like
to be
if a heaven
inevitable.
exists, if a heaven like exists, he would probably be in it. And in the universe of the world, if heaven is real, he would be there. And pretty much everybody who perpetrated his demise would be in hell. Is pretty much that's sort of that like assumption, that idea is kind of like operating in the background a little bit.
Absolutely. It's this question of what. it actually means to be godly, of God, of ascending to heaven, and it not being about, oh, I know the most quotes in the Bible or I'm this high up in the church, but rather your ability to stick to your faith and your belief in that faith is sort of what separates a godly person from an ungodly person, no matter your religion or belief. And we watch him burn alive, and then we have that final scene, which mimics, of course, one of the opening scenes where his wife walks out of the city, the torn down wall, right? They tear down the wall, and she walks out into the distance, and the credits roll by as she's sort of walking away. And there's almost this hopefulness that she will sort of spread his love and hope and faith and continue on despite what everyone has done, despite the fact that they've torn down this town. They sort of destroyed the city, but the
Yeah.
faith is still intact somehow.
It's not a fun ending because you're basically still on Earth, and Earth is basically hell. And so
Hmm.
yeah, you have like the wife, she comes like she like leaves the town. And of course you have that great shot of her leaving the town, and it's like, yeah, it's like at that point it's like what else could you do but leave? She doesn't have any lines, she doesn't say anything like this or that. She just basically like kind of like stumbles out into basically nothing, right? It's like kind of like it's just kind of like a wasteland, the French wasteland. I think it's just kind of like selling the idea that Earth is hell. Like it's a
Hmm.
hellish world. Hell already exists. Like we make it. Again, like things like faith and love, they can kind of transcend where we are, but sometimes it can't. And it ends in our demise. It's sad, but it can kind of be an inspiring story, which it kind of is. It's like that one novel too, that one Japanese novel, Silence, which was
Mm,
adapted into that Scorsese movie.
Scorsese
Kind of
film.
has like similar
Yeah.
stuff going on too.
Should we bring us to our final thoughts then? I feel like we've
Yeah, I think we
this up.
summed it up.
I will say there's nothing about this film not to love. Performance wise, set design, music, sound design, everything about it, direction is just top tier. I mean, it's the reason we watch movies, it's the reason we make movies. And I was so skeptical going into this piece because I have my qualms with the Holy Mountain. And so I was expecting a similar experience. And I understand the similarities of it when what you were saying. I see that. But I am just really moved by this piece and just touched in a way that I'm not by a lot of films, especially because this is sort of a topic that isn't something that often interests me. This idea of faith. I don't watch a lot of films about faith and don't think a lot about faith, but this is a film that legitimately sort of made me kind of look at inward and think about what my own idea of faith is and belief and what it means to be a sort of part of this human race and to be good and sort of continue on whatever it is that we do. So, all that being said, I think I'm going to give this film a very strong 9 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm going 10 out of 10. It's just an unbelievable movie. Its existence is just incredible and fascinating. I think all movies are about faith. I think
Mm,
every movie is about faith. And yeah, I just think like a movie like this, it just has what I was talking about earlier with it. It just has so much going on. It's very dense, but it's a movie too. When I was watching it, it's just like, sometimes like I'll watch a movie with my partner and we'll like talk about the movie as we're watching it or whatever. But The
yeah.
Devils is like a good example of a movie in which where we're just like kind of watching it and we're just like we've both seen it before, but we'll watch it and it's just like we won't even say anything during the
Mhm.
movie because I also think that the tempo of the movie it forbids you from like talking during it for some reason. Like it completely just wraps you up in it. I don't know. It's like kind of like this like reverence thing, but you're also just like really attached to it. You're just like, okay, what's going on? You don't want to miss anything that's going on because it's such a dense movie just in terms of everything that's going on in terms of like the story and the visuals. There's no movies like this that are made. Well, I say that, but and I'm also reminded of the movie Benedetta, the last Paul Verhoeven movie,
Right.
and that movie is very similar, but still, it doesn't have the '70s like look and feel to it,
Yeah.
which is of course now which can never really be replicated.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, to me, it's just it's perfect.
All right, y'all. Thank you, as always, for listening. And you can find everything I do at Austin Lugo.
I'm on Letterbox at Retro Andrew, RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and of course, YouTube with Nothing to Say. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks.